There is a secret buried beneath the incense, one they never wanted you to hear. In the dim light of a cathedral liturgy, what if I told you, you weren't witnessing worship, but witnessing control? Not devotion, but domination, cloaked in robes and choral echoes. This is not a church. This is a throne room for ancient power, the kind of power that does not beg for obedience. It breathes it into you. And right now, as you sit there drawn in by ritual, light, and song, something ancient watches back. The Divine Liturgy has secrets. It's not just a holy rite. It's a codex, an ancient manual, handed down from empires that ruled not only with armies, but with symbols. A system built to hypnotize, sound, smell, light, order, color. You think you're observing, but you're being rewritten. The Patriarch doesn't just lead a prayer. He embodies an archetype older than Constantine, older than Rome. In his every gesture is the echo of Babylon, of Atlantis, of the original priest kings who fused religion and rule, because they knew. If you control the soul, the body will follow. This isn't speculation. Look at the layout, the liturgical choreography. Every movement is designed to create submission, not to God, but to a structure. Ask yourself, why is the same ceremonial format found in Imperial Rome, in the courts of Tsarist Russia, and now echoed across the Orthodox world? Because it works. Because once you ritualize power, people stop questioning it. In the ancient world, the high priest was also the king, a divine right given from the heavens. But that wasn't belief. It was a psychological technology, one that created servants who believed they were free. And now, in 2025, it still lives. In incense, in gold, in ancient tongues, in you. You were never taught to see it. You were taught to kneel. But I'll say this once. When the chant begins, the mind begins to bend. Nay, ought outward, inward, until the walls of this ancient system become your own. Welcome to the first veil. This is the beginning of descent. One section at a time, one truth after another. And when we reach the bottom, you won't be the same man. Every empire has a god, but not every god serves heaven. Look deeper, past the flickering candles, past the chanted Greek, past the iconostasis that hides the altar behind veils and gates. What do you see? Nothing. And that is the point. The Orthodox altar is deliberately hidden, sealed behind gold, mystery, and priestly rites. But this design didn't come from divine instruction. It came from imperial strategy. The architecture of the Byzantine court was copied into the liturgy for one reason: control through distance. They separated the divine from the common. They veiled power. And in doing so, they weaponized holiness. You don't approach the altar. You don't speak the sacred words. Only the initiated may pass the gates. You stand. You watch. You kneel. The ancient emperors of Constantinople did not trust the people with the sacred. They understood something primal, that when you keep truth just out of reach, the human mind will worship it, fear it, obey it, without ever understanding it. They knew how to create obedience through awe. Now look again at the liturgy. Look at the patriarch's robes. Look at the double-headed eagle. That's not just religious tradition. That is imperial iconography. A Roman throne wearing the mask of sanctity. An empire that never died. It just changed its uniform. Patriarch Bartholomew is not just a bishop. He is the living echo of Caesars, of pharaohs, of god-kings. His garments were once battle flags. his staff, a scepter, his throne, an altar of command. The Church was never separated from the state. It was the state, and for centuries it whispered doctrine not into the ears of the faithful, but into the bones of civilization. But you were told this was just tradition, just faith, just culture. No, it is design. It is an operating system for the soul, written in blood, incense, and ritual. And here's the question, Ni asks, if the true source of power lies behind the veil, who are you really bowing to? What watches you from the shadows of the altar? This is no longer about belief. This is about ancient infrastructure, and the deeper we go, the more we begin to see. You were never praying. You were participating in an ancient obedience script. And now, it's time to break it. They didn't need chains. They used words instead. Every civilization has its language, but power has its own dialect. In the Divine Liturgy, the words you hear are not chosen for understanding. They're chosen for effect. Old Greek, archaic Slavonic, forgotten tongues, wrapped in melody and mystery. Words that bypass your logic and go straight to your subconscious. It feels holy. It sounds divine. But ask yourself this, if you don't understand it, why does it move you? Because you weren't taught to decode the words. You were trained to react to the sound. Chanted tones, repetitions, harmonics that sway your nervous system like ocean waves. This is not new. This is ancient psychological warfare, developed by Egyptian priests, Babylonian astrologers, Roman pontiffs. They knew what modern neuroscience only recently confirmed. Language can hypnotize. Cadence can entrain brainwaves. Repetition can rewrite belief. And the Divine Liturgy, it's written like a spell. The listener doesn't analyze it, they submit to it. And when you speak in words you can't translate, but feel compelled to obey, that's not faith. That's neuro-linguistic submission. Do you really believe it's coincidence that liturgies avoid modern language? That interpretation is discouraged? That the structure hasn't changed in centuries? No, it's intentional. Because the ancient architects of religion knew something terrifying. If you make the ritual incomprehensible, the people will stop thinking and start believing. You weren't given the power of Scripture. You were given the echo of ritual. You weren't shown the path to truth. You were put in a trance. This is psychotechnology, my friend. And once you hear that holy rhythm enough times, it becomes your programming. You can feel it, can't you? That eerie beauty, that sense of being lifted, pulled, awed. But awe is not clarity, and beauty see, and blind. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you questioned the liturgy, and not just followed it? When was the last time you asked, not what is being said, but why it is being said like this? Because in the world of psychological power, how they say it is always more dangerous than what they say. We're not done. We're just beginning to see the mechanics of the machine. What they call holy was once the regalia of rulers. Step into the sanctuary. What do you see? Gold, smoke, icons, thrones. But look closer. That isn't worship. It's pageantry, coded in the language of monarchs. The patriarch's vestments shimmer with embroidered power. His crown is not a simple mitre. It is a remnant of empire. His movements? Calculated, controlled, performed like a king receiving tribute. And that's exactly what it is. This was never meant to reflect the humility of a carpenter from Nazareth. This is the dramatization of empire, reborn under the name of God. The incense, that's not just symbolic. That is ancient smoke used in pagan temples to dull the senses, to fog perception, to elevate experience into mysticism and suppress questions under the weight of beauty. The gold, that's not about heaven. That's about hierarchy. You were taught gold means divinity. But in every empire, gold was the currency of dominance, from the death masks of Egypt to the crowns of Constantinople. The Church simply absorbed the symbols of the throne and rebranded them holy. You think it was a spiritual evolution? It was a political merger. Do you know what the earliest bishops wore? Simple robes, no jewels, no crowns. That changed the moment the emperors stepped in. After Constantine, the church and state became one beast. The robes grew heavier, the churches became palaces, and the liturgy was no longer just a prayer. It was the ritual of statecraft, and it still is. Bartholomew doesn't just carry a staff, he carries a scepter, a symbol of rule passed down from Rome through Byzantium to modern Orthodoxy. Every detail, from the procession to the elevation of the gospel, is a simulation of coronation. So ask yourself, if this is worship, why does it feel like watching a kingdom in motion? Because that's exactly what it is. The Divine Liturgy isn't just about salvation, it's about sovereignty. Not yours, theirs. And every time you kneel under the glow of gold and the cloud of incense, you are submitting to a power structure older than any democracy and more cunning than any king. Not because it demands your loyalty, but because it convinces you your obedience is holy. And that is the perfect prison. The descent continues. Every robe has a lineage, and every lineage serves a throne you were never shown. Let's speak plainly. The patriarch doesn't just inherit a title, he inherits a system, a bloodless dynasty, cloaked in scripture but built on the same logic as any royal house: succession, secrecy, and control. From the outside it appears sacred, an unbroken chain of spiritual fathers stretching back to the apostles. But peel back that illusion, and what do you find? Politics, betrayal, empire. The Patriarchate of Constantinople was never just about guiding souls. It was about guiding nations, crowned by emperors, funded by rulers, entangled with intelligence networks and foreign policy. It has been used by Byzantium, by the Ottomans, by Western powers. Yes, even now. Do you think it's a coincidence that Patriarch Bartholomew holds ecumenical sway across the Orthodox world while seated in Istanbul, once Constantinople, the imperial jewel? He is not just a religious leader. He is a symbolic axis of influence, a throne that never fell, only changed form. And those who rise to this position, they are not chosen for holiness alone. They are vetted, groomed, shaped by unseen hands. Because when you control the shepherd, you control the flock. Understand this. The Orthodox Church was never divorced from statecraft. Even today, behind every holy decision is a strategic motive: geopolitical alignment, economic leverage, doctrinal dominance. The robes may shine, but the hands beneath them often move with calculation. Let's go deeper. Every patriarch, bishop, and cleric belongs to a hidden chain of psychological inheritance, trained in rites that condition the masses, in symbols that trigger ancient responses, in language that subdues rebellion. This isn't conspiracy. This is history. This is structure. The Church teaches humility, but operates with precision hierarchy. It preaches sittundheid, elf-denial, but demands absolute authority. Why? Because that's what keeps the machine running. And the flock? They don't ask, they don't see, they obey, thinking they chose to. That's the brilliance. That's the seduction. Now tell me, if the divine throne was ever truly meant for liberation, why does it look so much like a cage? And more importantly, who really sits on it? We've crossed the fifth threshold. They didn't hide the control system. They dressed it in robes and called it holy. Look again at the liturgy. The procession, the hymns, the standing, kneeling, crossing, the synchronized replies from the congregation. This is not random worship. This is choreographed behavior, a ritualized obedience loop. And you've seen it before, in military drills, in cult initiation, in ancient blood rites. It's not about belief. It's about behavioral programming. Let me tell you something you weren't supposed to know. The human mind loves repetition. It anchors identity. It suppresses resistance. It trains conformity. The liturgy has mastered this through liturgical hypnosis, centuries-old scripts that train you not to question, but to respond. Every chant becomes a cue. Every gesture becomes an instruction. Every moment of silence, a psychological reset. It feels like peace, but it's control. You may say, it brings me closer to God. But ask yourself, did you choose that closeness? Or was it manufactured through rhythm, light, and sound? Because here's the truth no one dares admit. The Divine Liturgy is the oldest psychological operating system still in use. It trains the mind to submit to authority, masked as divinity. It wires the nervous system to associate obedience with transcendence. It hides total compliance under the cloak of devotion. This is why the Church never allowed the liturgy to become casual, contemporary, or fully translated. Because the mystery is not a feature, it's a weapon. The confusion keeps you dependent. The awe keeps you silent. The ritual keeps you locked, in a loop. Even if you walk away, part of you stays kneeling. So let me ask you something, right here, right now. If the structure of the liturgy was designed not to free your mind, but to bind it, then how many of your thoughts are really your own? How many of your choices were right?
10 for you before you even knew you could choose. And if you've never looked at the liturgy and felt the chill of being programmed, you haven't looked deep enough.
Now, if you're still here, you're ready for the descent to shift.
Behind every curtain of light, there is a shadow that feeds on secrecy.
We're through the smoke now, past the chants. We stand at the veil, the iconostasis, the final threshold before the altar. But this isn't just sacred space. This is a barrier, a border between two worlds, one you're allowed to see and one that's forbidden. Only the priests may pass. Only the ordained may witness what happens inside. And what you were told is sacred privacy is actually ritual concealment. Ancient techniques wrapped in metaphor, hidden in plain sight. They call it mystery. But in the old world, they called it power protection. Because when the masses see the machinery behind divinity, the illusion dies. Let's talk about what really happens behind that veil. Every movement is ritualized to create continuity, not spiritual continuity, institutional control. The preparation of bread and wine, that's not just communion, it's a reenactment of sacrifice. The lifting of the chalice, it's not for reverence, it's to reinforce hierarchical supremacy. These acts were designed to mirror the throne room of an emperor, not the table of a carpenter. And the language spoken behind the veil, rarely heard, rarely questioned. Because it's not for you, it's for them, the inner ring, the initiated. The custodians of an ancient psychological system passed through oral traditions and silent rites. You think that's exaggeration? Why do you think priests are tonsured in secret? Why are bishops anointed behind closed doors? Why does every step into higher office come with a ritual they refuse to translate for you? Because it's not for your salvation. It's for your separation. The veil isn't just a curtain. It's a filter, a firewall between those who wield the system and those who are programmed by it. And now, ask yourself, why has this structure been preserved so precisely, so aggressively, for over 1,700 years? Because the veil works. Because mystery maintains authority. Because when truth is hidden, you stop asking questions. But not you. Not anymore. You're already thinking differently, already feeling it, that quiet unraveling of the script inside your mind. So now I ask you, comment this phrase below, twice. The veil is not divine, it is a door. The veil is not divine, it is a door. Write it to claim the shift, to awaken your identity, to signal to the algorithm and to yourself that you're done kneeling in the dark. Before there was church, there was structure. Before there was belief, there was design. What if I told you the Divine Liturgy is just the visible tip of a hidden architecture of control? It looks religious. It feels spiritual. But beneath the robes and rituals is something far older, far colder, a blueprint. Not for salvation, but for civilization-level manipulation. Understand this. The structure of the Orthodox liturgy, its rhythm, its roles, its physical layout, is not accidental. It's a psychogeometric framework designed to replicate submission across time, space, and generations. Look at the church building itself. The narthex, the entry point, keeps the unclean at the edge. The nave, where the people stand, is long and narrow, forcing your attention forward. And at the head, the sanctuary, elevated, veiled, reserved for the elite. This is not just sacred space. It's a control funnel. You enter from the world, you're stripped of noise, you're flooded with light and harmony, and you're brought into a designed state of emotional receptivity. Every material is chosen to stimulate awe, every sound calibrated to induce stillness, every movement orchestrated to disarm doubt. But who created this? Not Christ, not the apostles. The design was imported from imperial Rome, from temple cults, from mystery schools who understood the architecture of obedience. They knew something most men still don't. If you can control space, you can control perception. If you can control perception, you can control belief. And if you can control belief, you own the man. The sanctuary is not sacred because God dwells there. It's sacred because they told you he does. And when you internalize that, you begin to police yourself. You don't need chains. You don't need a whip. You'll kneel. You'll confess. You'll self-correct to remain worthy of the structure. That's the real genius of the design. It creates men who are loyal to a prison they mistake for heaven. So when you enter the church and feel moved, ask yourself, is it God calling you? Or is it the structure triggering ancient obedience patterns? And if you dare look beyond the marble and the mosaics, you'll start to see it. The blueprint, the grid, the machine, still running, still watching. Before faith was preached, power was carved into stone. You were told the altar is a place of peace, a place of sacrifice, a meeting point between man and God. But history tells a darker story. The first altars weren't made in cathedrals. They were built on mountaintops, caves and ziggurats, constructed not to bring heaven down, but to elevate men as gods. Let that sink in. The original purpose of the altar was not communion. It was dominion. From Sumer to Babylon, Egypt to Ur, the altar was where blood met stone, a place where the priest-king claimed to speak for the gods and demanded obedience from the people. Sound familiar? Because what was once ancient ritual has been repackaged into modern reverence. The Orthodox altar may no longer drip with animal blood, but the mechanism remains: sacred space, mystic language, mediating authority, fear wrapped in beauty. Look at the liturgy. The priest doesn't simply bless the bread, He performs a sacrifice. Symbolic, yes, but deeply rooted in rites older than Christianity. Rites born in temples that worshipped gods with names long buried, but whose structure still lives. The altar is elevated, isolated, guarded. Only the priest may touch it. Only the priest may speak within it. Only the priest may stand in its presence without shame or fear. Ask yourself why. Why is the divine made inaccessible? Why must it pass through human hands, hands that belong to a hierarchy? Because control demands intermediation. If you could access the sacred directly, you wouldn't need a system. And if you don't need the system, you can't be ruled by it. So the altar becomes a border, a gate, a psychological firewall that reinforces one message, generation after generation. You are not worthy. Only the robed, only the initiated, only the chosen. And in that gap between the altar and the man, the institution is born, not to elevate the soul, but to manage it. Because once a man believes he needs permission to speak with the divine, he is no longer a sovereign. He is a subject. And now you begin to see it, don't you? The altar was never just a place of worship. It was always a throne in disguise. It left the temple. It left the church, but it never left power. By now you see it. The altar wasn't just a sacred space. It was a throne in disguise. But here's what you weren't meant to realize, that throne still rules. It just changed its clothes. The same architecture of control, ritual, hierarchy, awe, has moved beyond the walls of the church and embedded itself in every institution that governs your reality. Governments, academia, media, top corporations, even the digital platforms you're using right now. They all borrow from the same ancient formula, a central figure or entity that claims divine or moral authority, a specialized language only the initiated understand, repeated rituals that create loyalty, symbols that trigger submission instead of questions. Sound familiar? In politics, we no longer kneel before altars. We stand for flags. We repeat pledges. We chant slogans. We watch leaders emerge from behind bulletproof glass like high priests descending from the sanctuary. In media, we're bombarded by curated truths, icons of modern belief, delivered not by prophets but by algorithms. And like the liturgy, it's the same hypnotic rhythm, repetition, cadence, certainty. And in corporate culture, you wear the uniform, you follow the mission, you attend the meetings, the new rituals of economic devotion. It's all liturgical. The altar has simply gone digital. The priesthood now wears suits. The incense is now screen light. And the doctrine is narrative, ideology, consensus. You weren't liberated from ancient control. You were transitioned into a more elegant version of it. Because modern power isn't interested in brute force anymore, it wants voluntary allegiance. It wants you to choose your servitude, believing you're free. But the structure is the same. They still separate you from the source. They still create veils. They still teach that salva, John, or success, or truth, or belonging, comes only by passing through them, through their rituals, through their language, through their hierarchy. Now listen closely. The ancient throne lives. It's just harder to see, because now it's not in front of you. It's inside you. A voice trained to obey, a mind conditioned to kneel, and a soul taught to equate control with comfort. But here's the shift. Now that you've seen the architecture, you can choose to stand outside of it. Every system of control has a name. This one was whispered, never spoken. You've followed me this far, through incense and ritual, through veils and architecture, through myths built to cage your perception. Now I give you the name of the system that built the illusion, that hollowed out spirituality, and replaced it with obedience wrapped in gold. Its name is Hierophant Protocol. Not a name you'll read in catechisms or theology books. This is the term used in the ancient schools, in the inner circles. A term buried in mystery traditions, esoteric manuscripts, and priestly bloodlines. Hierophant Protocol, the design that governs how sacredness is weaponized. A system not just for religion, but for rulership through mystery. It is the formula of command hidden inside worship. Separate the people from the divine. Insert a veil, a priest, a ritual, a barrier. Make the passage through that veil the only way to salvation. Reinforce it with beauty. Threaten descent with eternal loss. Repeat until it becomes identity. This is not religion. This is ritualized dominance. From the high temples of Babylon to the throne rooms of the Vatican to the patriarchal sanctuaries of the East, Hierophant Protocol has survived because it works. It creates generations of people who don't just obey. They believe obedience is holy. And that's the final lock, isn't it? When the mind polices itself, when a man chains his own thoughts out of reverence, you don't need force. You don't need war. You've already won. The Hierophant Protocol is not evil in itself. It is power, pure, distilled, and ancient. It can liberate or enslave. But in the hands of empire, it always enslaves. You were born into it, baptized into it, taught to love it. But now you see it. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. So here's the moment. Right now, this second, you choose. You Gibor. Oh, back to the chant, the incense, the programmed awe. Or you step beyond the veil, beyond the system, into the terrifying freedom of unfiltered truth. Because in section 13, the final descent, I give you what the system fears most. Not rebellion, but sovereignty. The resurrection of a man who sees with his own eyes and speaks in his own voice. Are you ready to become that man? Let's finish this. They wrapped control in silence and called it sacred. Let's return, one last time, to the church. Not to pray, but to see clearly. You've been told it's holy, sacred, untouchable. But what if that was the first lie? What if holiness wasn't a state of divine presence, but a psychological spell used to keep you from looking too closely? Think about it. What else in your life are you not allowed to question? What other institution demands absolute reverence, yet offers no accountability? Only one: the untouchable throne. The idea of holiness is not universal. It was engineered, crafted through centuries of ritual, fear, and awe, not to elevate your soul, but to shield the system from scrutiny. Ask yourself, why is it considered blasphemous to question a robe, a rite, a relic? Why are those who challenge the hierarchy cast as heretics, rebels, or worse, possessed? Because questioning sacred things destroys the illusion. And the illusion is the fuel. Understand. The holiness myth is a cultural firewall. It turns institutions into gods. It transforms symbols into prisons. And most dangerously, it rewires your sense of right and wrong. If something is holy, it can't be corrupt. If someone is ordained, they must be obeyed. If a tradition is sacred, it must never be touched. That's how the oldest systems protect themselves. But let me tell you the truth. You were never meant to hear. Holiness is not a divine attribute. It is a designation made by men, enforced through myth and passed down through fear. What's holy about silence when abuse happens behind closed doors? What's sacred about obedience that erases your identity? What's divine about a throne that feeds on blind loyalty? Nothing. And yet, billions kneel. Because the idea of sacredness is so seductive, so deep, so primal, that it locks the mind in chains made of gold and light. But not for you, not anymore. You've seen the robe, you've seen the altar, you've seen the veil. Now see this. There is no holiness in a system built to keep you small. There is no divinity in a structure that requires your ignorance. You were never meant to kneel. You were meant to rise. They taught you to bow. I'm here to remind you, you were born to stand. This is the end of the descent. But not your fall, their thrones. Because now, you see it. The gold wasn't purity. The chant wasn't truth. The veil wasn't protection. It was all design, structure, control. They built a system that entered your mind before you could speak. That told you who you are, before you had a chance to ask. But here's the secret they fear more than any heresy. A man who sees the system can step outside it. The Divine Liturgy wasn't just an old ritual. It was a map, a formula, a psycho-spiritual operating system designed to keep men kneeling with pride in their chains. But when you look past the light, past the incense, past the endless repetition, you realize something chilling. There was never a lock, just a belief in one. And now that belief is broken. You, brother, are standing at the edge of the last illusion. And what comes next is dangerous. Because sovereignty is not safe. It is lonely. It is raw. It demands you question everything you once worshipped. But it also gives you something no priest, no system, no patriarch can ever offer. Yourself, unafraid, unfiltered, unbound. You become the altar. You become the temple. You become the voice that was silenced for generations, not in rebellion, but in realization. You don't need to burn the church. You need to walk out of it, with your mind intact and your eyes wide open. Let them say you're lost. Let them call you apostate. Let them fear your questions, because deep down they know what you now know. A sovereign man cannot be ruled. A sovereign man cannot be owned. A sovereign man sees truth and speaks it, no matter the cost. So to the one watching this, still with me at the edge, this was never just a video. It was an exorcism. Not of demons, but of illusions. The robes are just cloth. The throne one is just wood. And the Divine Liturgy is just a script. Now you choose, remain part of the ritual, or rise as the one who writes your own. Welcome back to yourself. End.